History is often written by the winners. For a long time, we only knew about the Persian Empire through the eyes of their enemies, the Greeks. In Greek stories, the Persians were often shown as an endless tide of barbarians. But deep within that tide lived a group so disciplined, so mysterious, and so terrifying that even the brave Greeks spoke of them with a mix of fear and respect. They were called the Immortals. But why? In a world of bronze swords and wooden ships, how could any man be immortal? As we peel back the layers of time, we find a story that is even more interesting than the myth. This isn't just a story about soldiers, it's a story about a superpower, the Achaemenid Empire, and how it used psychology, fashion, and extreme training to dominate the known world. If you were a common soldier 2,500 years ago, seeing the sun glint off the gold spears of the 10,000 immortals was the last thing you ever wanted to see. Today, we are going to break down exactly who these men were, how they lived, how they fought, and why their legend still haunts us today. To understand the Immortals, we have to look at their boss, the King of Persia. At its peak, the Persian Empire was the largest the world had ever seen. It stretched from the borders of India all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. The king was not just a politician, he was the king of kings. He ruled over dozens of different cultures. He needed a force that was loyal only to him, not to a specific city or a local governor. This led to the creation of the 10,000. Think of them as a mix between the Secret Service, the Navy SEALs, and a royal parade. They were the king's personal bodyguard, but they were also the iron fist he sent in when a battle was too tough for regular troops to handle. They represented the stability of the empire. While other units might run away or rebel, the Immortals stood like a rock. Let's solve the biggest mystery first. The name. Why immortal? The Greek historian Herodotus tells us the secret. It wasn't magic. It was a very clever HR policy. The unit was strictly kept at exactly 10,000 men. No more, no less. Imagine you are in a massive battle. You see an immortal fall. You think, great, one down. But before his body even hits the dirt, another man steps forward from the back. He looks exactly the same. He has the same gold spear, the same colorful robes, and the same cold look in his eyes. This happened instantly, because there was always a massive waiting list of trained soldiers ready to join. The unit appeared to never lose a single man. To an enemy soldier who was tired, hungry, and scared, this was a mind game. They thought, are these men even human? We kill them, and they just keep coming. It was the ultimate psychological weapon. It created an illusion of an infinite, unbreakable army. You couldn't just apply to be an immortal. You had to be born into it. The bloodline. First, you had to be a pure-blooded Persian or Mede. In an empire of many nations, the king only trusted his own people with his life. The childhood. The training started at age 5 or 7. While kids today are learning to read, these boys were learning to survive. They were taught to endure extreme heat and cold. They were forced to go days without food. They practiced the 3 truths: to ride a horse, to shoot a bow, and to tell the truth. To the Persians, lying was a sign of a weak spirit. An immortal had to be a man of his word. If he said he would hold the line until death, he meant it. The education. They weren't just thugs. They were taught about their religion, Zoroastrianism, and their history. They believed they were fighting for the side of light and truth against darkness and lies. This gave them a religious fanatical edge that made them even more dangerous. When you see them in movies like 300, they look like monsters in masks. But the real immortals were the best-dressed men on the battlefield. The robes. They wore long, flowing silk and wool robes, dyed in bright purples, yellows, and blues. To a Greek soldier in plain bronze, This looked like a parade. But this was flexing. It told the enemy, "We are so rich and so confident that we can wear luxury clothes to a massacre." The armor. Hidden under those beautiful robes was their secret: scale armor. Imagine thousands of small iron or bronze scales sewn onto a leather shirt. It looked like the skin of a snake. It was much better than the solid bronze plates the Greeks wore, because it allowed the immortals to move their arms freely, jump, and run without being weighed down. The bling. They were covered in gold jewelry, earrings, bracelets, and necklaces. Again, this wasn't just for fashion. Gold was a sign of rank and a reward for bravery. The unit was so famous for its gold that the Greeks called them the Golden Army. The Immortals were hybrid soldiers. Most ancient soldiers were either archers or spearmen. The Immortals were both. 1. The bow. They carried a large, powerful bow made of wood and horn. They would start a battle by firing thousands of arrows at once. Ancient writers said their arrows were so thick they blocked out the sun. 2. The spear. Their primary weapon was a 7-foot spear. What made it special was the butt, or the bottom of the spear. It had a metal weight shaped like a pomegranate. This acted as a counterweight, making the spear perfectly balanced and easy to spin and thrust with one hand. 3. The Athanatoi. This was a short sword or dagger. If the enemy got too close for spears, the Immortals drew these blades for quick, lethal work in the crowd. 4. The shield. They used a wicker shield, gerin. It was made of woven sticks and covered in leather. It sounds weak, but it could stop arrows perfectly and was so light that the soldier could carry it all day without getting tired. This is the big one. The year is 480 BC. King Xerxes is invading Greece. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, the Spartan king Leonidas is holding the line with 300 Spartans and a few thousand Greeks. For 2 days, the regular Persian soldiers were slaughtered. Xerxes was getting angry. He finally shouted, "Send in the Immortals!" The Immortals marched in silence. They expected to walk right over these Greeks. But they ran into a problem: geography. In the narrow pass, the Immortals couldn't use their bows because they were too close. They couldn't use their numbers to surround the Greeks, and their wicker shields were being shredded by the long, heavy Greek bronze spears. For the first time, the Immortals were dying in large numbers. They only won because a local Greek man, hoping for a reward, showed the Persians a secret mountain path. The Immortals hiked through the night, came down behind the Spartans, and finished the job. It was a victory, but it proved to the world that if you could get the Immortals in the right spot, they could bleed just like anyone else. What was life like when they weren't killing people? The Immortals were a state within a state. They had their own supply chain. When they went to war, they didn't eat the dry bread the regular army ate. They had special wagons carrying fine food, wine, and even their wives and servants. They lived in the capital cities like Persepolis and Susa. They were the men you saw standing at the gates of the palace. They were the king's friends and his most trusted advisors. Being an immortal meant you were set for life. You had land, money, and power. But this luxury had a downside. Over hundreds of years, the Immortals became soft. Later kings started caring more about the gold jewelry than the training. This would eventually lead to their downfall. Every legend has an end. For the Immortals, that end was a young man from Macedonia named Alexander the Great. Alexander didn't fight like the Greeks of the past. He used fast cavalry and even longer spears. At the Battle of Gaugamela, the Immortals stood their ground. They fought bravely around the chariot of King Darius III. But Alexander's charge was too fast and too violent. When the Persian king panicked and ran away, the heart of the immortals broke. They were loyal to the king, but if the king was gone, what were they fighting for? The empire fell, and the original 10,000 immortals were disbanded. Their gold spears were melted down, and their silk robes were burned. The immortals didn't really disappear. Their ghost stayed in history. Centuries later, the Roman emperors created the Praetorian Guard based on them. Napoleon Bonaparte had his Old Guard, soldiers who were also considered elite and unbreakable. Even today, the idea of a 10,000-man elite unit is a staple of movies, video games, and books. The Immortals taught the world a lesson that every modern army still uses today. Professionalism is everything. They weren't just guys with swords, they were a system. They were the first special forces in history. They were immortal, not because they couldn't die, but because their legacy refused to die. As long as we talk about the great empires of the past, the 10,000 men with the golden pomegranates will be marching in our imagination. Thank you for diving deep into the history of the Immortals with us. It's a story of gold and blood, of silk and iron. It shows us that even 2,500 years ago, people knew that to win a war, you have to win the mind first. What do you think was their most impressive feature? The gold spears? The 10,000-man rule? Or their colorful fashion? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the secrets of the ancient world. Until next time, stay curious.